Awesome. Hi, everyone. I am Shannon Kendall, and I work at American Crafts here in Linden, Utah. And I am excited for you to be joining me today in this Michael's class about resin. So if you've never been to one of my classes before on resin, welcome. You're going to love this product. It's super fun and super easy to work with. And if you've been to one of my classes before, welcome back. It's good to see you again. And we're going to do some new stuff today that you may not have seen in one of my other classes. So let's just jump right in and get started. Okay, what is resin? Resin is a two-part epoxy, which is basically a glue, a really strong glue, that when it's separated from each other, these two chemicals, they're fluid liquids. And when you join them together, then you get a hard acrylic glossy epoxy finish. So I like to tell everyone first off that a tip that I have is to label my bottles and my lids so that it's really clear to me, because once these two mix, they're going to make the tightest, strongest super glue you've ever seen. So I don't want to accidentally put my resin lid on my hardener bottle or vice versa, because then it might get stuck on there and it's really hard to get off. So I always just put a little sticker or write in Sharpie on my lids so that I make sure to put them back on the correct bottles. And I also do that with my measuring cups. So these are my little measuring cups that come with the resin from Michael's. And I just wrote on them in a Sharpie to match my bottle labels, and then just covered them with a little piece of Scotch tape. And that way it won't rub off when I clean my cups. The Scotch tape just keeps the Sharpie on there. And then I can use these over and over again without having to wash them every time, because I only put A in A and only put B in B. So that's my very first tip. So other things that you need, you want to cover your work surface, because this is really sticky stuff. So if it spills, you're going to want to have an easy cleanup. So I just cover mine with a plastic tablecloth. You could also use parchment paper or a silicone mat. Resin does not stick to silicone. It's like the only thing it doesn't stick to. So that would be a good thing to use too. That's why we can use silicone molds, which are really fun. We're going to work with some today. The other things you'll need are some little plastic cups or paper cups. Doesn't really matter which, whatever you prefer. These I just have today are just little like bathroom cups, and those work really great. Then you'll also want to keep on hand some baby wipes and some rubbing alcohol, because that is the key to cleaning up resin spills. A little bit of rubbing alcohol on a baby wipe gets it off skin, gets it off your molds, gets it off your bottles, your table, everything. So that is a great way to clean it up, as long as it's wet. Once it cures, it's stuck. So then the other thing I always say is gloves, because again, sticky business with resin. So always wear gloves, whatever gloves you like. And I'm going to put mine on right now so we can get started right into mixing our resin. I also keep popsicle sticks or silicone tools nearby for stirring when I'm mixing. Also, you're going to want to be in a well-ventilated area. So open a window, turn on a fan, wear a mask if you want to. Some people wear the filtration masks for chemicals. If the smell bothers you, then you're going to want to wear one of those. Or if you're working with it a lot, you're going to want to wear one of those. Usually I have on a fan and the window open, and I'm fine. So let's get started. All right. So I also have these cute little silicone measuring cups that you can just get on the baking aisle or on the resin aisle. And these are really nice because when you mix your resin in them, then you stir it, and then it's really easy to wipe out and clean. So we're going to just start jumping right in. So the key to it is equal parts, A and B. So we're going to start with A. I'm actually going to use my bigger measuring cup for this first one. Okay, so this is just another silicone measuring cup. It's just a little bit bigger, so it holds a little bit more. And I'm just going to pour equal parts A and B into my cup. I'm going to get down on the side so I can make sure that I get equal parts as close as I can. Some people like to weigh it. I never have, and I've never had it fail. So I think if you're just careful with your measurement lines, you should be okay. Then go to the second half, equal parts. I'm doing a big batch because we're going to do a bunch of stuff. This will stay pliable for about 30 minutes before you can't pour it anymore. So since we're going to be moving kind of quickly in this class, I just made kind of a bunch, but usually I work in smaller batches. So you'll probably want to work in smaller batches unless you're doing a large pour. If you're doing a tabletop or a big wooden board, like we did last class, we did a charcuterie board and it was a big one. And so I filled this all the way to the top when I did that one. So now I'm just going to stir. And this is the part where you need patience because you need to stir it for about 3 to 5 minutes. And you're going to want to try to go kind of slow. I always rush it and I have to pace myself and remember to slow down because if you go too fast, you're going to work a lot of air bubbles into that resin and you don't want that to happen. You can get them out later, but it's just better if they don't get in there in the first place. So I don't know if you can see in my cup, but it's really cloudy in there. And I have all of these streaks going on. You can kind of see them moving around. That's how you know it's not ready. Because when it's ready and you've stirred it enough, then you're going to have 100% clear fluid in there. So I'm just going to keep stirring and keep stirring and keep stirring. Feels like a long time, but if you're listening to a book or music or a podcast or watching a movie while you do this, it goes by faster.
Do you mix for the same amount of time regardless of how much resin you are using?
Yes. Yep. And you can for sure tell when it's clear. Like I can still look in here and see cloudy streaks. So if I'm doing more, I usually go 4 minutes probably. And less, it's usually clear by the 3 minute mark. But I say 3 minutes minimum. And I always try to like take my stick and scrape the sides of the cup a little bit. And lift it up from the bottom. Still have a few streaks. And I'm stirring too fast. Got to slow back down. You can see my bubbles that I've worked in because I stirred too fast. Have to really pace myself. I'm a quick crafter, so I like to hurry. So it's hard for me this part, to stir slowly. But it's worth it in the end. Because any bubbles that you get left and trapped into your molds will create a little hole when the resin cures completely. And that's not what we want. Okay, I can tell even there looking at the camera that it's getting clearer. Can you guys see that? Less streaks. So we're almost there. And sometimes I'll pick it up and look at it on my stick too to kind of see if it's streaky still. Give it a little bit more just for good measure. See, I scraped the side and another wisp of cloudiness came in. Just gonna stir it just a little bit more.
Does this resin work well with alcohol inks for colorants?
Yes, we're going to use some alcohol inks today as our main way of coloring. You can also use mica powders or pearl powders. Those are the things that I've tried. And sometimes if I have a really dense glitter, I don't even need to add any other color other than the color of the glitter because it will tint it and fill it up very beautifully. Okay, so now we're mixed. We're pretty clear. I think it's clear. Now I'm going to grab those little plastic cups that I showed you before. I'm going to start with 3 or 4 of them. Okay, the first thing we're going to make is, for this class, I kind of wanted the theme of gift giving because as the holidays are approaching, I always think, you know, what could I make for someone and give them a little bit of something I've created and not just something I bought. And they always love those kinds of gifts. And so I thought, what could I do that could be the gift is also the packaging. And so we're going to use these little Trinket box molds and make little gift boxes. But then whoever you give it to can use it in the future as the Trinket box. So it's not a throwaway gift wrap. You get the gift wrap is the gift. Okay, I'm going to pour some of this into each of these 4 little cups. You can see there when I pour it that it is very clear. No more streaks. We got them all out. Okay, and I'm gonna leave a little bit of clear. I always reserve a little bit of clear when I'm working with resin because I'll show you some tricks you can do with that clear that help when you're using it. Okay, now it's for our alcohol ink. So I'm going to do 2 different Trinket boxes. The mold set comes with a square Trinket box mold and a round Trinket box mold. And so I'm going to show you a little bit of each one. And it's 2 parts, so you actually get 4 molds in the set. And it's a lid and a base for each shape. And just make sure on the lid that you are pouring into the correct side. So this one has the little lip that kind of comes over, and this one just goes straight up. This is not where you pour. You want to pour on this side where it has the little lip that comes up and around. Okay, so that's how you tell which way. And then with these molds, this is going to end up being the top of the mold. So the top of your design is at the bottom. Okay, so let's do this simple one first. So we'll do a red one. I figure some of these could be holiday colors and some of them could be everyday colors, right? You could give the gift either way. So this is an opaque dye. This one is the red opaque dye. And there's also translucent dyes, which I'll show you in a few minutes, but I'm just going to add some drops. I don't usually count. I just go for it. And then just stir it into your resin. You can start with less and then add more to make sure you're getting the color that you want. You can see that that's tinting that nice and pretty. And I want this is
for getting bubbles out. Do you have any tips for getting bubbles out if they stirred too fast?
Yes, sometimes I'll take my cup and I'll actually like tap it because the bubbles want to rise up to the surface. And then after you pour, I'll show you how to rise the rest of the bubbles with a heat tool. You could also use a lighter or some type of flame. Heat helps them rise, and gravity just kind of the opposite of gravity, I guess. They want to rise up. So we just help them out a little bit by tapping. You could kind of see them. I could just see some of them popping just by tapping like that. And if you just kind of let it set and then come back to it, a lot of them will have worked their way out. Okay, so these are little foil flakes. I want to add a little bit of shine to my red here that I'm working on. So these foil flakes come in a pack with multiple colors, and I just pulled the red ones out. I better put about half the jar in. Save the rest for something else. Then I'm just going to go ahead and stir those straight into my resin and my color. Because I'm doing a single color and one single mix-in, I can do it this way, all in one cup. Okay. Now we just pour it right into our mold. So I'm going to start with this one right here, this little round lid, and we'll make the lid first. You just kind of pour it in. The single color ones are really quick. And I always want to get all of my resin out. So I'm going to scrape the sides of my cup. I don't like wasting any of it. Making sure it's all the way full. Okay, now here's some tips for bubbles. So there's these awesome little tools that are these silicone tools that you can get at Michael's. I'm going to put my glove here so you can see the tips. And I love this pointy tip right here for getting bubbles out. So I'm just going to take that and I'm going to put it into my mold and kind of run it along the inside rim. That's where the bubbles tend to settle. And just work those bubbles out toward the middle so I can get to them. And push the resin back into that part of the mold where the bubbles tend to get trapped. You can see a few right there. We'll get those out. The big one right there. Yeah, got that out. Okay, and then the last thing I do to prevent bubbles is just grab my heat tool. This is just a regular heat tool for like embossing and when you do stamping. People always ask me if you can use a blow dryer. You do this real quick and then I'll keep explaining. So this heat applied on here raises those bubbles up really nicely. So I just kind of hit it with the heat tool. Okay, now it's looking nice and shiny. And I could go ahead, if I see another bubble, just go ahead and use your silicone tool or a toothpick and go ahead and push it in there. I don't recommend using a blow dryer for that because it's more, the blow dryer is more air and less heat, and a heat tool is more heat and less air. And what you need is the heat on this. So I do use blow dryers when I'm working with resin frequently if I really want my resin to move. Like if I'm doing a big pour and I want it to move like a wave across what I'm pouring it on, that's when I use the blow dryer because I want the force of the air. But for bubbles, you want the heat. So you could even take a lighter and just rub it across the top, and that would also help them bring the bubbles up. Okay, so now I'm just going to set that aside. It needs to cure for 12 to 24 hours before you unmold it. So it's kind of a long wait, but it's worth it in the end. And I have movie magic so I can show you what it turns out like in the end. I'm actually going to put a little bit more of this in one of these cups because I'm going to pour both the bases now at once. So I'm going to just fill this cup. Both of my bases I'm going to do kind of a creamy white. So this is opaque white dye. And I just always like to shake up the bottle. When you first get the bottles, you'll need to pierce the top of the nozzle with a pin or a toothpick or something. This one has a little bit of blue dye in the cap, so I'm going to just clean that off so I don't get blue in my dye. I must have put the wrong cap on, but I'm just cleaning it off with a baby wipe. And I'm just going to do a couple drops to make sure it's not blue. Oh, this one actually might need to be pierced. Let me switch for a different one. Good thing I brought it back up white. Okay, this one is pierced. All right, and no blue. So now I'm just going to drop a bunch of white, like 20 drops. I guess I don't ever do it the same way twice. I guess if you were making batches of stuff and you wanted it to be exactly the same, then you're probably going to want to count. Okay, so now I'm going to go in with a tiny bit of gold just to creamy up this white just a little bit. So I'm just going to do 2 or 3 drops of gold. And then I'm going to stir it in. Oop. My extra gloves. You can see that swirling all in. Pretty. I think I'm going to need a little bit more white. I can already tell. So I'm just going to go back in and grab my white dye again. Stir some more. Now you don't have to dye your resin. You could leave it clear if you wanted to and just add glitters to it or anything else. Sometimes you can float things down in there, like dried flowers. You could put them down around in the side of the clear. But it's kind of fun adding color with the dye, so I like to do it. So now I'm getting this kind of really pretty, soft, creamy white color. This one is a little bit, because of my opaque white not being pierced, I don't have a pin with me in the studio today. I'm using the translucent white, and so it's a little bit lighter than my finished sample is going to look like. But now you can see kind of what the translucent white would look like compared to the opaque. Okay, I still see some streaks of white, so I'm just going to incorporate that in, give it a tap, get my air bubbles up. Okay, and then I'm just going to pour that into both of these molds right here. Okay, we'll see if we have enough to do both. These molds are hollow on the inside, so it doesn't take as much resin as it seems like it would. I'm going to let it drizzle kind of slowly down in the sides since it's kind of a deep, skinny mold. That way I won't get any air bubbles trapped down in there. Kind of let it flow in there naturally. Just fill it up. Sometimes on these bigger molds, you can also kind of squeeze them like this, and that will release some of the air bubbles if you have any in there. You can do that same trick. I love these silicone tools because I can just clean it off with a baby wipe super fast. Okay, I can just stick it down in there. Same way I did on the lid. Oh, I just saw an air bubble come up, so it's working. And then hit it with a heat tool. Then I would just do the same for the square one. I might not have quite enough resin, so I might have to mix some more to fill this one all the way up. But you get the idea, just kind of letting it go around the sides. Now, if I wanted to do two colors, like maybe that's what I'll do with this one. So I'm going to pour this color down in the rim, and then I could mix another batch, let that cure completely for at least 12 hours, and then come in and do a second layer of another color on the bottom. I think that's what I might end up doing with that one since I didn't quite pour enough resin in there. That's how you layer. You let each layer cure for about 12 to 24 hours, or just overnight, check it. As long as it's solid enough for you to kind of tap on it, then you can put another layer of resin on top. Okay, so that's what we'll do with that one. I'm just going to set this one aside. And if I didn't want any of this to dry on my mold, where I spilled it just a little bit, I'm going to get a little bit of rubbing alcohol on a baby wipe. I just put it in a squirt bottle for ease because the big nozzle on my rubbing alcohol was kind of hard to manage. And I just take my finger in the baby wipe and kind of wipe it away. That way, since I'm going to do a second color eventually in this one, I won't have any residue from this first color on the bottom inside of my dish when it's done, of my box. Okay, so now I'm going to set these two aside and we'll work on this lid. And I want to show you a different technique that you can do that's not a single color in this lid. I'm just going to wipe this out, make sure it's really clean. Okay, so we have these two that we divided before. I'm going to bring this cup back, put a little bit more clear in it, and do a little bit of white in there. Okay, so I'm going to do one that's really gold. One that's a little bit gold, but I'm going to put some glitter in that one. So I love these glitter spinners from Michaels. They are like a bunch of different colors all in one little shaker. And they're super, super fun to use. And so I'm just going to go to the gold one. They're fun to use in resin because you get a lot of glitter colors in one package. Okay, I'm going to just stir these in. There's my super glittery one. See, that super fine glitter is so fun in there. It doesn't hardly need any dye. And then this one, I'm going to just stir up just plain gold. And this last one, I'm going to do a little bit of white again. I put a little more than I normally would because, again, it's that translucent dye instead of the opaque. You can use them interchangeably. They just are a little more sheer, those translucent ones. The white is still pretty creamy on the translucent, so I can get it to look like I want. Okay. All right, I'm going to set these over here. I'm going to show you this fun technique of how to do multiple things in the one lid. So I'm going to take my reserved clear. I still have a little bit left in there, and I'm going to just do that right down the middle. Okay. Then I have these fun little pearls. These are little white pearl mix-ins. I don't know if you can see those. They're like little beads, but they don't have any holes in them, so they're just the little pearls. And I'm just going to sprinkle some of those right into that little river of clear that I made. And I'm going to grab I'm going to use this end of my tool now to kind of push those stray beads just down there into that clear resin. And I'm going to kind of shape it how I want, although resin has a mind of its own, so we're still going to be surprised, but I can kind of control a little bit where it's going to go as I fill in the rest. So I'm going to do this river of pearls down the middle of this Trinket box lid. Okay, then I'm going to take the white next, I think, and do a little bit of that along each side. And we'll build this out to the gold part. So it looks like it's kind of splitting open with pearls being exposed. I'm just using my stick, my craft stick that I stirred with, to add this resin to the mold. Pour some of that in.
About if you can use acrylic paint instead of dye to color resin.
You can. It will be opaque. So I would say go easy. You don't need very much. But yes, it does work. It's a great idea, especially since we usually all have acrylic paints on hand. But if you want the translucent, you'll need to go the alcohol ink route. Okay, so now you can kind of see that I've got the rivers flowing here. And this is where you could use a blow dryer if you wanted to. I'm going to use my heat tool to kind of move those rivers of color. Push the gold away from the clear. Now, if I wanted that pearl layer to stay completely free of the gold completely, I would pour that one layer and let it cure for 12 hours or so before I added in the other layers. That way it would be a solid clear line right down the middle, but I'm okay with it kind of flooding in like that. So I just went ahead and did it all at the same time. It's just up to you how much time you have and the look that you want. The last thing I'm going to add to this is some foil flakes, which is another really fun add-in. These are just like little pieces of gold leaf foil. They're really fun to use. And again, I love my little pointy end of my silicone tool, and I just dip it in a little bit of the clear resin to get it sticky on the end. And then I just stick it right in here and pick these up because this stuff sticks to my gloves really easily. So I just like to pick it up this way so I don't waste any. And I'm just going to lay that down in, and I'm going to kind of push it down in. I could have done this also right after I put the pearls in. If you want the foil to be more prominent in your piece, you'd want to do it right on that little extra clear layer that was right next to my pearls before I poured in the white and the gold. But you can kind of push it down in. These heavier beads and things will sink, so they'll kind of work toward the front of your piece. Heavier glass glitters will also do that. You can see I pulled out a big piece of foil. I'm just going to go down each side. I try really hard not to touch this stuff with my fingers because I find it just makes my gloves nice and pretty foiled instead of my piece. Get off another little bit of this. Come along the sides of my gold. It's fun to try different mix-ins in there. And there's a lot of fun things at Michael's that you can find there that are fun to mix in. Lots of fun holiday glitters. We're going to use some of those in a minute. Foils, little wood pieces, all kinds of stuff, beads. Okay, so now what I would do is I would let this sit and cure, and then I'd come back in and do a clear layer or some more gold on top. Or you could just fill from the sides if you're okay with your pearls not staying completely uncovered. Kind of fill in from the side, but you can see the resin flows toward the center. I'll do a little bit more on this side just to get it a little bit more full. And then we'll hit it with the heat tool one more time, since I added more foil and resin. Then you would just want to make sure, like I would need to go around and make sure also that I got my bubbles out of, they kind of like the corners of these square lids. So just make sure your corners are free of any bubbles. This side needs a little bit more resin. And I usually come just flush with the top of the opening of the mold. You guys get the idea, right? Okay, so now I'm going to set that aside and let it cure. And I'm going to pull out my finished ones to kind of show you how they turned out. Let me pick up this foil. See, I don't even like touching it with my fingers when I pick it up off the desk. It just sticks to my gloves. Okay, let me move all of these things over and take off my gloves, and I'm going to pull out the finished ones. Okay, so here's some that I did before class. This one, I flipped them. So this time I did the red in the circle, but this time I did the red in the square. So they're opposite. So there's my lid with all those beautiful foil flakes in it. It's got this little rim so it will nest nicely in my box. And here's my box base. And these you just roll the silicone mold down. If you're having trouble getting it out, you can put a little bit of water in there and it will get between the mold and the piece and come out really nicely. So there's my box base. So there's one box. And here's our gold one. So there's my pearl line. That one turned out really sparkly on the top. Really like how that turned out. Super shiny. And then here's the round base. These are cute little boxes because of the little extra lip on the bottom. I like how they turned out. They look cute on a dresser or a nightstand. So there's your other little box. Now, how can we make these pretty? So I'm doing a simple way. So I made these earrings previously in a resin class with my leftovers from another project. And I'm just gonna take those and gift them to someone. So I'm gonna put a little bit of shred, paper shred, in the bottom of my box. You could use whatever you wanted in here or put nothing, just put the gift. But I think the shred looks kind of nice. And then just lay the earrings inside and put my lid on. And then just using some awesome ribbon from Michaels, because I love all of their holiday ribbon. They have so many fun colors of ribbon. I'm just going to cut a length of ribbon and tie it around my box. And now look, your little trinket box has become your gift box. So there it is. And that is cute as is, but if you want to even go a little extra, I love all of the floral pieces that you can find at Michael's during the holidays. They're so fun, these little floral stems. And so you can just come in with one of these and a pair of wire clippers and just cut. This one's a sturdy one, this red one with the beads. You just kind of wiggle it and cut. Come on, come off, little guy. That one doesn't want to cut. We'll just cut some beads. I only have my tiny jewelry pliers, so you might need a little stronger ones, but. And then you just tuck those behind your bow. Let's get a little piece of this one. Of course, I didn't have this much trouble cutting them when I did my original samples. They normally just cut right away. There's one that I cut earlier. And you just slide it in there. A little bit of the red. Now you have this cute little package that you can give to someone. Just add a tiny little tag to it or just give it to them as is. And then they get to keep their gift, their packaging as a gift. And here's a few more that I did to just show you the different variety that you can do. They were done with the similar techniques. And here's a red square one. So there's all kinds of fun little trinket box, gift boxes that you can do as a gift for your friends or family during the holidays. Okay, I want to show you this other cool mold. And some more things that you can do with gift giving with resin. So there is this really fun mold at Michael's. It's new, and it is a 6 ornament mold. So this has 6 spots for shapes in one mold. And it's not very deep, which is nice for ornaments because if you use a live tree, if you have a live tree at your house, you're going to want them to not be quite as heavy. So we're going to do these and we're going to make ornament gift tags that then your receiver of your gift can hang the ornament on their Christmas tree and keep it as a decoration. So we're going to do a few different things. I'm going to put my gloves back on real quick. Some similar techniques and a few different ways to do those techniques and get different looks. Okay, I'm gonna mix some more resin. I'm actually gonna use these bits that we have left over because I'm gonna need some more white. So I'm just gonna, you can do this too. So if you have a little bit left over and your resin is still fluid and it hasn't started to heat up and harden, that's how I know when it's getting too late. It starts to get warm. You can add to it and then just add more colorant and sparkle if you want to increase the colorant and sparkle in there. So I'm going to get all of that out of there, and then I'm going to mix a little bit more. This is going to take me just a second to mix more resin, but I don't like making too much at once because if it does start to harden on me, then it's just wasted. So if anyone has questions while I just mix up some more resin, I'd be happy to answer them for you. Just going to do the same amount again.
So the work time for resin is about 30 minutes before it starts?
It's about 30 minutes. This one is still pretty fluid that we made at the beginning of class. So 30 to 40 minutes, I would say. And when you pick up the cup, you'll feel it getting hot. And you'll start to see it starts to take on the texture of bubble gum. That's when it's too late. Too late to pour because it's starting to cure. All right, I'm going to stir this big bunch. I forgot to bring my I have a long silicone spatula that I just got off of the baking aisle. And I like to use that when I'm using this taller cup. But I didn't bring it to class with me today, so I'm going to have to stick my hand down in there with the craft stick. I always forget something. I make notes and I try to make sure that I haven't left anything at my desk, but without fail, I have forgotten something every time I've taught. But we can make do.
When using mica powders, do you always mix them in with the resin?
I've done it a couple of ways. So you can mix it straight into the resin and it gives this really beautiful pearl shine to the resin and color. And then you can also paint the mica powder right inside your mold. So like if you wanted to paint a design inside your mold just with a dry paintbrush and the mica powder, or line the sides of these if you wanted a gold rim on the edge, you could do that. That's really fun to do when you're working with geode coaster molds because you can get that gold edge. And then when you pour the resin in, the resin will adhere to that mica powder and stick to it. So when you unmold, you'll have that nice shiny metal on the metallic shimmer on the sides of or the bottom, wherever you painted it on, it would show up. It's really fun. I always say with resin, just try different things. Just mix up a little bit and try it. People have asked about food coloring. I have never tried food coloring in there personally because I have all of the alcohol inks here, and so that's what I prefer. But if you wanted to try it and see if it works, just mix up a tiny little bit and color it and see what happens. See if it cures properly using those other things. It's kind of experimental science crafting with resin, but it's fun. Stirring too fast, I'm getting bubbles. I always feel bad wasting time in class just stirring, but that's the nature. Okay, I think that's good enough for what we're gonna do and what I wanna show you. Normally I would glance at a clock, make sure I stirred that for a good 3 to 5 minutes, but we're just gonna move on so I can show you. All right, so there's all different kinds of things we can do in these molds, and we can pour them all different things in all of the spaces at the same time. So I'm just gonna get a bunch of different cups. I'm gonna start with the Snowflake Ornament. Now for these tags, I want to make a bunch of them, and so I'm not going to fill them all the way. And you can do that with your molds. You don't have to fill them all the way to the top as long as it's not part of the structure of the mold. So like on the lids and on the boxes we just made, you do have to fill those to the top in order to get the shape of the box complete. But for these, since they're just a flat ornament, you don't have to fill it all the way to the top. So to save on your resin, you can just fill it part way. So I'm going to do this snowflake. First, I'm going to start with some holographic sprinkles, glitter. So these are from a kit that were the holiday glitter sets that came in 4-packs at Michael's, and they're super fun. And they go kind of a long way. I've made a lot of stuff with these. I'm just going to pour that straight into the clear. So I didn't add any dye to that one. And that's going to be the middle part of my snowflake. Might put this one on my granddaughter's gift since she loves Elsa and Frozen. We'll do a snowflake theme for her. Add just a little bit more. So I kind of pick it up on my stick and see about how thick it is on there and if I'm liking how it's looking. Okay, and then I'm just going to pour it straight into the center of this mold. I have my white. I want to also make sure I have some white on hand because I'm going to do a little technique that uses the white as well. Okay, this one's starting to get sticky. This is my one from before, but it's still fluid enough that it's okay. So I'm going to use that one. Okay, so I'm just going to pour this straight into the center of my snowflake. We'll try to make it look as much like ice as I can. I'm going to just fill it part way, and as it's starting to move into these sides, I'm going to come in and drizzle my white into the tips of each snowflake. I know this might be hard to see because I'm working clear on white, on clear on white. But in the end, when I show you the final product, you're going to see how awesome it is. Kind of messy, but I always make sure that I stick my stick down around the little hole. These have little holes at the top for the string to go through for your ornament. And so I always make sure that my resin is around that really well so I don't get a bubble there. And I'm just going in each little corner of white. Then I'm going to come back in the middle again with some more clear. Holographic clear. Okay. Then I'm going to just take my favorite little tool again with my little stick and my pointy end of my silicone tool, and I'm just going to swirl some of that white and clear together where they meet. And it does it naturally, so you don't always have to do this, but sometimes I like the look that I get when I can do a little white swirl. Okay, and that one's ready. Okay, so I have a little bit of this clear still left, and I don't want to waste it. So I'm going to make the base of my snowman also have this. This is going to be one where I'll show you in the end what it turns out like because we don't have time to do all the layers today in class. But on this one, what I did last time is I just spread this, a thin layer of this clear snow, holographic clear, in my snowman. And it's really thin. It's not a ton in there. But I'm going to let that cure completely and then come back and add white and gold on top of that snowman. Okay, so there's our snowman that's done its first step. The snowflake is done. It just needs to cure. Okay, so let's do the tree next. So I'm going to do 2 colors on this one. Pour a little bit in there. Okay, and I'm going to use a translucent dye, a green translucent dye on this one. Try not to get it in my snowman mold. I'm kind of messy with stuff, so sometimes I have to make sure I move my finished piece away so that I don't accidentally squirt dye into it. If that happens though, you can just try to get it out with your silicone tool or a toothpick or your craft stick. It usually floats there for a minute. Okay, I'm just going to stir in this green, and I did green in both, but I'm going to do different glitters and see what that looks like. We'll just use the glitter to give us variety on our tree. Okay, so in one of these, I'm going to put this chunky green glitter that was also from one of those little kit sets of 4 holiday glitters from Michael's. Actually, I'm going to put that one in this one. The smaller amount of resin, I'm going to put that in. Just stir that in. then on this one, I'm going to use a chunkier one from the same kit, which is this one. It's got some reds in there. I did have the little cute glitter Christmas trees, and that's on my final sample, what you'll see, but I used them all up because I love them. I used the whole bottle on multiple tags, but this will work too. Okay, so I'm going to just pour that chunkier glitter on that side. Scrape it all down in there. Okay, and this one, I'm going to pour both of these in the mold at the same time. So you have to be ambidextrous for this one. So I want this one to kind of stay at the bottom and this one to kind of go at the top. So let me slide this back down. And I'm just going to pour them at the same time right into the mold. So it'll kind of be a half and half tree. Okay, and I'm going to take my little silicone tool. Make sure I got it all around that knob at the top. And you can see I'm only filling these about half full, but they're still significant and they're perfect for tags at that size. And then if someone has a live tree, again, it won't weigh it down. Okay, and I'm just going to move this glitter around. This little tool is so handy, I'm telling you. You need a set of these. Okay, there's our little Christmas tree. We'll see how that turns out. Now I've got this extra green that I don't want to just waste, but I'm not going to use it. Well, I might use a little bit here. So I'll save it. I'll save it. I was going to do it in another Trinket dish, but I think I'll save it for the stocking. Okay, let's mix, pour a little bit more, and we'll do the ornament. Okay, and that one I need some white. We'll do some gold. Grab one more little cup. I've got all kinds of cups going on over here. Actually decided to divide that even a little bit more. Okay, let's do some red in this one. We'll use this green, and then we'll use a little bit of clear, some of our white. I think I can still pour that white, so we'll keep going with that. And then in this one, let's do this chunky multicolored glitter. It's a different chunky multicolored glitter. It's in the red kit, and it has all the golds and silvers and reds and greens all in one fun glitter. So this one's super sparkly. It's got small glitter, big glitter. Okay, we're going to do this one similar to, I'm going to do a striped ornament, and I'm going to do it similar to like I did the pearls in our lid of our Trinket dish. So I'm going to start with this as my center stripe, this big chunky one. And I'm just going to pour that straight down the center of my ornament. Now, it's not going to be perfect because resin has a mind of its own, but I'm going to try to like help it out a little by putting a little clear layer right next to that layer. That kind of helps the resin not to blend as much. So now I've created a little clear barrier. Let me stir my red. I'll do it on the top. Put some red glitter in this one. Might as well glitter it out. You can do that the holidays and it's fun. Okay, so there's some red glitter. I'm going to do that at the top. And as I pour this in, it's going to push that stripe back down where it belongs. We'll do the green at the bottom real quick before it pushes it all the way to the bottom. And it'll always be a surprise when you unmold to see what you end up with. They're always fun and pretty.
We have a question. If you
Sure.
to reuse the craft sticks after they harden again.
You could, yes, you could. It won't come off the craft stick once it's hardened on there, so you could just use it again. I just take a baby wipe and I just do this and get it kind of clean. And I use them over and over and over again. They work really good. Let's do the rest of this in here in the stocking. So sometimes I'll start, and if I have extra, I'll incorporate that little extra bit into my next piece because, again, no waste, right? We'll do a green toe. You can see I drip on my mold. I don't worry about it because it will just peel off when it hardens. Other than I don't want to waste it, so I try to scrape it in there. I'll do some white at the top of this one, if I can get my white to pour. Oh yeah, so you can see that white is thicker by how it's pouring out. I'll do a little bit of white at the top. Okay, and then the star, I just did the same way that I did my lid to my box, which was creating some rivers of color. So we can do these golds that we have mixed already over here. You can see those are a little thicker, but they're still pourable. Just barely caught them in time. I'll do some, I'm gonna stir this a little bit because my glitter's kind of moved to the bottom. Actually, resin that sat for a little while, you can suspend your glitter in just a little bit better because it won't sink as much. And this one, I'm just gonna kind of go for it with the gold. Okay, a little bit more in the top there. Sometimes I'll take my gloves too and do this to get all of it off my craft stick. I just really don't like wasting it. So I always tend to have a few little extra molds on hand so that I can pour some earrings or something with my extra bits. Okay, I'm just gonna make sure that this is all nice and around my posts in all of these. And then I'll show you the unmolding. Okay, so you would just set that aside and let it cure. I would have to come back in and finish my little snowman, but I'll show you what he looks like when he's all done. Okay. Just gonna clean up all these cups, move them out of our way so you can see these last little bits. Sticky business, resin, but super fun. People have asked me before too if they could do it with their kids, and I would say you could, but I would say it takes for sure parental supervision. And maybe just let them sprinkle in the glitter or something like that so that they feel like they're helping, but you can kind of control the mess. Okay, let's pull this up. Okay, so here's our mold that's all finished. And here they are all in there. And let's unmold them so I can show you what they look like. So there's the snowflake. It's got a lot of little corners, so it's a little harder to pull out. So there's the snowflake. Here's my snowman. So you can see I went back in after that first layer dried with the white and the gold, and that's what he looks like. So you can see it's not totally perfect at the top, but it's still super cute to do the layers like that. Here's our Christmas tree, and that one has the Christmas tree glitters in it that I love so much that I used up. Here's our ornament. Oh, those stripes stayed pretty well. So there's our ornament. Stocking. This one I did red on the top instead of white. So I had a little red left over. And here's our star. All of the gold. Now, to make them into gift tags, it's as easy as just tying them onto things. So here is a bag that I tied the snowflake onto. So I just used an existing bag and just hung the snowflake. They just hang a little white tag on there with the to from, the name. Here's the snowman on a red bag. And this one, I took the handles off the bag that were existing and added some of that pretty Michael's ribbon and tied a little knot and a little bit of that floral sprig right there as well. Fun to wrap. Then you can just tie them onto packages as well. So here's our ornaments tied onto packages with cute Michael's Christmas ribbon and gift wrap. They just need to from tags. And then you can do them on smaller things. Like if you were doing neighbor gifts, these just have chocolates inside of them. We don't get to really see a lot of people this year, but you could maybe drop something like this off on their porch. These are just little canvas bags, and I just tied the little ornaments onto them with the Michael's ribbon. There's one more mold that I didn't pour today, but I want to show you that makes a really great tag, and it's this Snowflake Coaster. It's already super thin, but it's really, really detailed. So I just wanted to show you how pretty these turn out. They're an open coaster, and they're really, really fun tied onto things as well. So that one, I just did a gold version and tied it onto a box as well. And then they could use it as a coaster or an ornament, whatever they would like to do. They make really cute little gifts. So the last thing I wanted to show you real quick, we just have a few minutes, so I'm not going to pour anything else, but I'm just going to show you. There's also these cute little catch-all dish molds. And these I made using leftovers from my ornaments. And I just poured them in there, and they made these cute little catch-all dishes. This one's the circle one. It comes apart in 2 pieces, so you can get the round out. So that was leftover from my tree ornament. And then you can use those as little gift boxes too. So I want to show you a few samples of that. So here's some that just have chocolates in them with a little bit of the sprig tied on and the ribbon tied on. And then they can use that little trinket box as on their nightstand or on their dresser or in their bathroom. These I filled with little gifts like nail polish. So this one is more just layers of gold. So each one of these layers I let cure before pouring the next layer. And then I just did some little hair ties and some nail polish in that one. And this is just, I just set the dish right down inside of a cellophane bag. And this one has resin barrettes that I'd made with some leftovers at another time. And they're just those cute little resin barrettes. And then this one has some earrings that I'd made in the past, just like my little other box did. I just put a pair of socks that matched them and the little earrings. And this one is kind of like an ocean colored box. I did that one with the leftovers from my snowflake and some more white and gold. So there's all kinds of fun things that you can make with resin and give as gifting. And then the gift keeps giving. They can just hang it on their tree. They can keep the little trinket boxes. It's so fun. And I hope that you guys have enjoyed this class, that you learned something today, and that you'll want to give this a try in your gift giving this season.